The time is now. Welcome back to the Time is Now podcast. Thank God we could be here together today. On this podcast, we speak to entrepreneurs from all industries and figure out what makes them tick, where they came from, what business means to them, and how they achieved success. I'm Dr. Slava Shut, a doctor of physical therapy, serial entrepreneur, and your host. To introduce our wonderful, amazing guest today, I'm very excited to introduce Mitchell Yass, developer of the Yass Method and author of 3 books. He's committed to offering a targeted, customized program that strengthens muscles using progressive resistance. I'm looking forward to asking a lot of great questions, and we're going to get a deep dive into the Yass Method. So let's get into it. Being a doctor of physical therapy myself, I've gone through ups and downs and watched this industry sort of change in many ways, but in many ways stay exactly the same as we did decades ago. And some of the physical therapists are kind of like still stuck in the mud and the prehistoric age. What do you think?
I concur 100%. If you looked at the curriculum of an orthopedic surgeon from the 1970s to 2022, a physical therapist from the 1970s to 2022, in the area of pain, it is identical. Nothing has changed. There has not been one iota of attempt to understand the fact that chronic pain is a brand new entity. It never existed in the history of mankind. It began in the mid-1980s and has progressed ever since. Therefore, you have to come to some understanding of what is the etiology of it. Until you get there, you're just doing the same thing, spinning the same wheels. And guess what? Evidence shows 130 million Americans and 1 billion people worldwide suffering from chronic pain. Not a single year has that number ever gone down. That should tell you something is systemically wrong.
Absolutely. I agree with you. We need some changes, and we need revolutionaries like you and I. Doc, tell me about your journey. I want to know your beginnings, your humble beginnings, and when you made it to the pinnacle, to the Yass Method. Okay. So give us the journey. Give us, this is entrepreneurial podcast, and we get to the nitty gritty. We see how people became successful. We want to know your struggles, your journey. We want to know about you.
Sure. So first off, if anyone wants to understand my journey, the idea of success is going to be very different from what most people perceive as success, as having millions of dollars or being incredibly financially wealthy and comfortable. That's not what this has ever been about for me. To understand my journey is to go back to my childhood. I was the 99-pound weakling. I was severely thin. I had massive self-esteem issues. And so I decided that I was going to change my body and I was going to lift weights. So from 19 to 26, I did everything that Joe Weider and Arnold Schwarzenegger told me to do. But I still was not able to put on muscle mass. I just had a very quick metabolism. At 26 years old, I said, and this is where I get a little bizarre, is that I said, you know what? I remember I took a high school physics course, and weightlifting is really the essence of pushing against gravity. And gravity is a force vector. So maybe there are laws of physics that can actually help me. So I started looking at force vectors, lever arms, fulcrums, summation of forces, all these physics laws. And sure enough, it helped me lift weights. And over the next 4 years, I put 40 pounds on. I go from 160 pounds to 200 pounds. I am self-taught in the physics of weightlifting. At that time, I was a project manager in construction, and I decide that it's not my path. I'm not really feeling satisfaction. So I'm going to go back to school. At that time, I took a job in a gym, and a guy tells me about these different careers outside of physician where you could treat people's bodies. One of them was physical therapy. So I said, okay, that sounds like it's right for me. So I go into physical therapy school, and you start off and you're taking your courses, but eventually you have to get to your affiliations, at which time now someone's standing in front of you and they're in pain and they're expecting you to be able to get them out of pain. So now this is where it gets very real. It's not where you're just learning some stuff. This person has come to you and is depending on you to help them resolve their pain. So by this point, the MRI became the gold standard. of diagnosing, and people would come in with things like, a classic example was the person came in with a meniscal tear. They had pain around their kneecap, and they were told that the cause of that pain was a MRI identified meniscal tear. Well, people have to understand that the meniscus lies between the knee, is comprised of two joints, lies between the thigh bone and lower leg bone. And if it were to experience pain or create pain, it would create pain at the joint line. Right. The person is having pain around the kneecap. That's actually a separate joint, the joint between the kneecap and the thigh bone. So if you are to accept the idea that that MRI is correct, then you can't accept the idea that the pain that's being experienced is not coming where it should be if the MRI identified structure was to create pain. So I started recognizing that everybody I was treating had symptoms not where they should be based on the MRI finding. And being the fact, first off, I was 32 years old. I was taught analytical thinking as a child. I said, I think I had a moral and ethical responsibility to start investigating the symptoms, right. Start trying to understand what is creating the symptom. And lo and behold, I find that in more than 98% of these cases I'm treating, the cause is a muscular deficit. It's being corroborated by other symptoms such as altered posture, altered movement patterns. You could see it in palpation. I'm pressing on a muscle and it's creating the pain. And so as a result of that, I was decided that in these cases, it's muscle. Remember, I just taught myself the physics of weightlifting. So I began to utilize and implement this understanding of strength training, and I'm getting people better in a treatment or two. And that literally from inception of graduation of school said, I think there's something here I need to follow through. And now it's been 30 years of really focusing on this, corroborating symptoms and causes, really understanding how to know which muscle is responsible, making sure I can really affect that muscle in the type of strengthening I do. And I can get pretty much anyone out of pain, even if you've had pain for 20, 30 years, in a couple of weeks.
That is truly amazing. I'm sure people will want to contact you, especially in your area. We have listeners from all over the place. And I understand you're from Florida?
Jacksonville, Florida. That's right. Yes.
Beautiful. So listen, if you're in Jacksonville, this is the man to look up to. Let's talk about the method itself. It's 30 years in the making in many ways. When did you come out with the Yass Method? And, in many ways, it should not be unique, but it's unique because, again, many don't practice holistically, even though it shouldn't be holistically. This is what we do as physical therapists. We analyze, we fix, we help, and we do not just treat symptoms. We don't put Band-Aids on problems. We should be going to the root of the problem. But unfortunately, your method is unique. Fortunately, unfortunately. So please tell us about the unique aspects of the Yass Method. When was its inception? And tell us the nitty-gritty about the Yass Method.
So for me, I always find the best thing I could do to discuss it is to give examples. So let's pick up a couple of points that you've mentioned. So first of all, someone's having pain at their inner knee. Anybody on this planet knows that you will enter the medical system and without any hesitation, you will be given a prescription to get an MRI. That is irrefutable globally. Okay. So the MRI is given where? Where do you get the MRI if you have pain at your knee? You get it at your knee, right? So the medical establishment's perception is that the cause of pain is always where the pain is being experienced. Now, the problem with the existing physical therapy style of treatment is that they follow suit. So typically, if you're a physical therapist, you're going to get your patient referred to you via some referring physician who gave the diagnosis to you based on an MRI. Let's say that MRI said they had a meniscal tear in their knee. The physical therapist is typically going to treat based on the diagnosis. Maybe they'll do some type of evaluations, but primarily that's oftentimes where this is going to go. Now, what makes the Yass Method is I can tell you irrefutably, I will go against anybody on this issue that the MRI is 100% baseless in identifying the cause of pain. Theoretically, clinically, and scientifically. Theoretically, it uses something called correlative theory, which is to simply say, you have pain at the knee region. I get an MRI. A hernia, a meniscal tear is found at the time of your pain. Therefore, it is asserted to be the cause of your pain. That is called correlative theory or junk science. That is the equivalent of saying, if I open my front door when the sun rises, I can say opening my front door causes the sun to rise, which is lunacy, right? To prove it further, I could tell you that the MRI would show you have two elbows at the time of your knee pain. Well, based on the same exact logic, I can say two elbows is the cause of your knee pain. Clearly, lunacy, right? Yeah. Now, we could also look at it from the opposing side. If these things cause pain, what should you find in people without pain? You should now find these structural variations. Oops, an MRI study showed that of the people who have knee pain, 63% have meniscal tears. Of the people who don't have knee pain, 60% have meniscal tears. So the entire theoretical basis for the MRI is proven to be a fallacy. When we look at it clinically, let's go back to that meniscal tear concept. You would have to find pain at the joint line. But the Yass method doesn't accept that kind of stuff. I'm going to say to the person, show me where your pain is. And guess where they're going to press? They're not going to press on the joint line. They're going to press about 2 inches down on the inner portion of the shin, which happens to be usually exactly where the hamstring attaches. Okay? They're also going to mention that their pain doesn't exist when they're sitting. But boy, if they go to stand up, if they go up and down stairs, any of that kind of stuff, it really increases. But then when they sit down and they rest, it goes away. If a meniscus or any structure causes pain, that meniscal tear is there 24 hours a day, right? So shouldn't you have pain 24 hours a day at a fairly constant intensity?
You should.
Well, the person didn't describe that. They say their only pain is associated with activity. So once the person has associated their pain with activity, you've just reinforced that the pain is muscular. You'll also see that there might be changes in range of motion. So if the hamstring was to strain and create pain on the inside where the inner hamstring attaches, if it was a severe strain, it's going to shorten. So you might find in that presentation of that individual where one knee, the unaffected knee, is fully straight, the opposite knee, they can't even straighten their knee.
Right.
It's short of straightening by a substantial amount, 20 degrees. So does someone want to say that the lack of straightening of 20 degrees is not a corroborating factor to the pain in the area?
Of course.
How does someone ignore that? You can't ignore that because every symptom that's happening at the moment most likely is associated, right? So then we might look at things like weight bearing, and you see the person has greater difficulty weight bearing. And when they weight bear on that side, you notice that they have pain at that point. You might notice when they stand that their hip, the pelvis on one side has fallen. Right. Well, that's representative of a weak muscle in the hip area called the gluteus medius muscle. And it just so happens that if the muscle is weak on that side, that hip muscle, it's going to cause the knee to cave in when you're weight bearing, and it's going to put stress on the inner knee, exactly where what actually lives? The medial hamstring.
Right.
So what I would be able to show through the Yass method interpretation of symptoms, history, looking at mechanism of injury, I could show and create a narrative that the pain at the inside of the knee is actually the result of a weak hip muscle causing the medial hamstring to strain. And you would have to do that to understand that. You have to strengthen not just at the knee, but at the hip. If you don't do the hip area strengthening, you'll never resolve the cause.
You're a man after my own heart. You know, mm-hmm. it's like listening to myself right now. That's beautiful. I love it. You know, having this kind of strong opinion and personality, how did you deal with school early on? Because for myself, I had some difficulty in school because some of the, especially orthopedically, I mean, we had a good program and everything, but some of it was, again, basic and archaic. And I already had determined that, you know, some of the medical model was just not fitting in the doctorate program for physical therapy. It's just, they're really two different things. And God bless physicians, but they're not physical therapists. And they've never rehabbed a person in their life. How did you deal with school early on? Did you just get through and say, okay, I'm just going to get through and let them say whatever they want to say, and I'm going to do my Yass stuff, when I get out?
You hit it exactly. So what happened was, I'll give you a classic example of what happened in the educational component. So you're taught that a person is having back pain, it's from a herniated disc, and you could do lumbar traction. But you are taught that the only amount of traction, the amount of force necessary, is half the person's body weight. So I'm 220 pounds, which means that if you wanted to separate my lumbar vertebrae to release the disc, I would need 110 pounds of pressure. Well, when we were taught how to use traction, we were told never use more than 30 or 40 pounds. First of all, because it's physically impossible to create more than that, because you're wrapping some bands around the rib cage and the pelvis, you're going to fracture a bone, and no one could tolerate that. Right. Well, that sounds very illogical. That sounds like you're handing me some stuff that doesn't meet that doesn't meet the logical means necessary for me to accept something. And so as that happened over and over again, I said, you know what? I'm done with this. First off, I'm 32 years old. I'm just going to get through this. And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to figure this out on my own. And even by that point, with that really huge, extreme understanding of weightlifting, as we were doing stuff in school and they were trying to lead you towards structural elements, I was already starting to play around with the idea and touch people and massage something or do an exercise and see if I would create a change, and I would. So I really came out of school saying, going through the process, I'm just going to get through it. When I get out, I'm going to go on my way. Now, the great news was my last affiliation was with the guy who was the therapist for the New York Islanders hockey team.
Oh, nice.
I got very lucky. That was my last affiliation. He loved me. I was an older guy. I was heavy into weightlifting. So 2 weeks into my affiliation, he said he would hire me. So I graduate at a facility where there's a massive population, straight orthopedic, and he's really not around for the average person. He's focusing on the Islanders. So it gave me this massive laboratory opportunity to take people. Nobody was there to determine whether what I was doing was right or wrong. It was basically, I was left to my own volition. So I basically started treating right out based on my initial concepts and was beginning to hone them, and seeing I was getting people in a treatment or two, I knew there was something very unique here. And so that's really the inception of how the whole thing began.
Have you tried to share your method, like, maybe more expansive than just your patients and, local region? Have you tried to create like your own coursework and methodology?
So this is kind of the issue. So that is a very, very common question I get. This idea that I could try to spread it and make people aware of it. I am a tiny, 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 tiny fish in a gigantic, gigantic pond. It's a huge pond. And I do my best to try to create awareness. I have a YouTube channel of 280 visits, and I've written 3 books. 2 are by Hay House, and I've done a PBS special, and I write for What Doctors Don't Tell You, an international magazine. And I'm a blogger for Bottom Line Health, the largest subscription newsletter. And even with all that, there's just not as big a demand as you would think of people. Remember, 130 million Americans alone. You would think everybody and their mother was looking for that answer. And the answer is that there are people after 6 failed back surgeries who will get the 7th one because they don't know there's anything different. And they think, and they are coerced into believing, well, maybe the next one's the one. And if you're trying to say something that's so completely different, it's very, very hard to break through the noise. And I mean, I could just talk from a personal experience. So I had easily the most successful physical therapy practice in the world. I had a 6-month waiting list. It was outrageous what was going on. I had people coming from other states, other countries. This is when I actually had a physical therapy practice for 15 years. And then health insurance collapsed. And I had to go bankrupt, and I closed. And I became very angry. And for years, I kind of was like Moses, and I kind of was walking the desert, really disillusioned. I mean, I was really mentally screwed up. Very, very bad.
Did you part some seas?
I actually, no, I wish that had been made clear to me. But up to that point, nothing happened. And finally, it led to divorce. And the divorce led to me finally becoming enlightened. And the enlightenment, the primary thing that happened for me was to recognize that this gift of knowledge that I was given by a higher power was never for my gratification. It was never for my purpose. It was actually given to me so I could be a conduit to others. And I simply had to become at peace with the idea of simply being the conduit, that was enough. Giving people this ability to be out of pain, even people who have been in pain for 20, 30 years, that was enough. And as that happened, and I started to feel the gratification and the love that was passing through me, I started to really come to the realization that that's it, man. That's what this is all about. And that I can spread this as best I can. And in fact, it's not a curse. It's actually a gift. And every time I work on an individual and they get that chance to be pain-free and claim their life, that's good. And that's enough. And where this will go, I don't know. I mean, I've produced so much documentation on this that it's overwhelming. I think even if I was to pass away, there's so much available. But I believe that this will slowly progress, slowly grow. There will be a people's revolution. And at some point, this will take over. There'll be a recognition. And I don't even care if you don't get the Yass method. But for God's sakes, let's stop using the MRI. It doesn't work. It's baseless. You can see it even in terms of the evidence after surgery. They produced the diagnosis failed back surgery syndrome. I didn't produce that. They did. They literally will give you surgery for your spine, and when it doesn't work, give you a new diagnosis called failed back surgery syndrome to now give you another surgery. I mean, it's insane what's going on. And there's just so many weird offshoots that are happening now. Now you got that whole group of people who are saying, oh, because no one's having their pain resolved. Oh, I know what the problem is. Their pain is not from a tissue in distress. It's not from pain receptors. It's actually just being created in their head. So we have to address them through some sort of hypnosis or mind-altering state or medication or antidepressants. Let's forget pain that's coming from actual tissues. That's where this has gotten. This is lunacy. This is lunacy. And it has to stop. If you've worked with anybody who's suicidal, and I've worked with hundreds of people, this is an unbelievably scary and sobering experience to have. When someone comes to you and says, if you don't fix this, I'm putting a bullet in your head. I'm putting a bullet in my head. It's part of what led me to the mental state I had reached. The pressure is overwhelming. The fear that you're not going to wake up the next day with that answer was overwhelming. And it's a lot of what drove me through trying to learn what I came to understand. So, you know, I feel that I am the resultant of the experiences. I did not choose my path. My path chose me. I truly, truly believe that.
Well, yeah, we have a higher power and we all have gifts that we've been taken in different directions. Sometimes you use the gift and some people are blessed, like yourself and myself, to use the gifts to help others, and some are not.
Right.
So it's interesting to tell a patient that is the pain is very real to them. It's real. And you tell them, hey, you know what? You're going through this for many years and you have these problems. It's in your head. It's in your head. Let's hypnotize you because what you're experiencing is actually not real.
Right.
So let's start tinkering with your head. So that alone is mind-blowing. I completely agree with you. And we don't want you to become like the Mona Lisa. You know, we don't want to wait to make you, help other people. We don't need you dead before, you become great again. So let's keep helping people.
Yeah.
So answer me this. Why do you think that the medical community is so close-minded? Why is there so much pushback for expansion and understanding that pain is real, first of all, and that their symptoms might be contributory to other problems to their pain. Like, why do we have so much pushback, do you think?
So I think a lot of it is the idea that the advent of the MRI began in the mid to late 1980s. By the way, most people don't know this, that the MRI was not designed to identify the cause of pain. It was designed to identify tumors in the brain. This idea that it was designed to identify the cause of pain simply was inputted. It was created. That is not true. It was never designed for that. And I don't believe any studies were ever done at the time to prove that it identified the cause of pain, because it physically can. So you're talking about 40 years of an implementation of a system that this is what everyone has to understand. This is not just a medical issue. This is a cultural issue.
Right.
This idea of the MRI, if I said to 1 million people, raise your hand if you think arthritis causes pain, 1 million people would say that's true. That was simply cultivated culturally because when they had pain, they were shown they had arthritis. The reality is arthritis can never cause pain. The actual process of osteoarthritis is so slow in its progression, it cannot cause pain. You could say the same thing for the herniated disc. Disc material is fibrocartilage. It has no pain receptors in there. A disc cannot cause pain. Think of the logic. Your disc has to take the shock absorbent value of you going up and down. Imagine a person jogging, the kind of forces that are running through that. You would literally be yelling, ow, 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 every time. It's just simple nonsense. But because this has been pushed for so long, people have accepted this. Even when the evidence, people, 20, 30, 40 years of pain, they've tried all these treatments and they're still in pain and they're still willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. It is a cultural creation. I always try to make people understand. You don't understand this premise. For 10,000 years, people threw rocks at the moon because they thought it was an evil spirit. 10,000 years they threw rocks at the moon. So when something gets built into society, into culture, into the conscious, it's very, very hard to break it. And I actually am treating a guy who's now pain-free, but he's a doctor. He's a pulmonologist. And what he told me was shocking, because I used to get very mad and say I'd attack the person. They're malicious. He said, they're not malicious. Their educational training says that they have to provide some sort of diagnosis from hell or high water. It doesn't even matter if it's valid. They think the end result of their responsibility is a diagnosis. So if the MRI gives them a short mechanism to that, he said that's why they do it. It's not malicious. It's a education-based mindset that they've been forced into. They're forced into this feeling that they have to give a diagnosis. And if this is the easiest way to achieve that, then they're good with that.
Yeah, that's our medical model. And our medical model of tertiary care is based upon third-party reimbursement. So
sure,
it goes hand in hand. The only reason the medical community has to absolutely, especially in orthopedics and pain management, have to have a diagnosis, because if you're going to do any ancillary care or imaging, you have to have a diagnosis.
Sure.
There's no reimbursement without diagnosis. And thank God we, as real medical providers who are there for start to finish, A to Z, we work on impairments and functional limitations. So we could care less about your diagnosis, to be honest with you. The only reason we need it is also for, you guessed it, folks, third-party reimbursement. So my cash patients could care less what their diagnosis is from their doctor, because they know that I'm going to see them from top to bottom. And then guess what? I'm going to fix the problem, not band-aid the symptoms. So that's awesome, Doc. You know, I hear that you're still big into like Zoom and stuff like that. You're taking technology and used your gifts and talents onto the big screen, as I call it. So tell us the pros and cons of still using Zoom, and have you noticed that people are craving again to come back to that human interaction?
Yeah. So what happened was in 2015, I did the PBS special, and for the PBS special, the producer wanted to have a big publisher provide the book that was going to be part of the gift package if you were to pledge. And so he ended up getting me with Hay House. Hay House is the second largest publisher in the world. My books are sold here, Canada, England, Australia, India, and South Africa. So what happened was, just through the release of the book, and I did a second book in 2018, there began, and then the PBS special, which aired extensively in Canada, I started getting people contacting me who wanted treatment, but they weren't going to come to Jacksonville, Florida. So that was the advent of why I started utilizing Zoom. And at the time, there was no Zoom. It was actually Skype. And it really wasn't very effective. They really hadn't perfected it yet, but we did what we had to. And I do agree with you that even from a local perspective, when the COVID thing, there was people who just didn't want to do the in-person. But for me, the availability of Zoom, before I was with you, I just treated a lady in Canada. And I was able to establish cause of pain. It was a muscular deficit. She couldn't walk. It was real good. We did some exercise. And her point was that, it's very humbling. It really means a lot to me. She said, I could have gone to a lot of local practitioners. I literally could have gone in, but I'm telling you, after learning about you and your method, that none of them could have achieved what you could. And with Zoom, you're literally in my living room with me right now. And you're doing the exercises with me, and you're helping me resolve this. So in that regard, Zoom is a very effective tool. I do agree with you 100% from the local perspective. Everybody wants to come back to in person. And by the way, so I have this office in Jacksonville, and I kind of make a fairly bold statement that if you come here for 3 days, regardless of what your symptoms are, if in fact I can prove that it's muscular within those 3 days, you'll be substantially, if not completely resolved. You'll walk out of here. So that does give people the opportunity to do like a mini vacation concept, and they'll get a hotel local. They'll stay for the 3 days. They'll get the in-person. And by the way, the thing that in-person gives you is touch, right? So I could provide massage and stretching. Right. It also allows me to be a little bit more accurate in seeing things from different perspectives when I'm doing the evaluative concept. So I always endorse if someone can come in person. And next week, I have a guy coming from New Orleans who I tried a couple of times with Zoom. We really haven't gotten the full effect I want. And he said, it's really good because the airlines with the COVID, it's so cheap. It's $80 round trip from New Orleans to Jacksonville. So the guy's literally coming. And I think it's great.
Is there a book or a speaker that has inspired you that really that really speaks to you, that opens your mind and has, helped you along this way?
Yeah. So this relates to me as a person, not as a practitioner. It's the book that's really kind of the pinnacle of understanding of George Washington, which is called His Excellency. And it actually describes George Washington's life, literally from a child throughout his life. And what most people have no understanding of, 6 weeks prior to the end of the Revolutionary War, he was one of the biggest failures that you could have ever imagined. He failed in almost everything. He failed when he was part of the French-Indian Wars. He had tremendous problems. He actually, to make money, if you want to talk about it, he married a widow, Mary Curtis, and that's how he got all his 40,000 acres. He was actually very low middle class, and he wanted to gain wealth. And so he even, and most people don't even know this, he got Mount Vernon through his brother, who married a rich woman. She died. He then went down to Barbados, got syphilis and died. And the only living relative was George Washington. So even in the path of the Revolutionary War, there was actually an attempt to overtake him as the general. They actually wanted another guy to become general and overtake. So he had a lot of failure in his life. Wow. But there were certain themes that he believed. First off, he thought God was looking over him at all times. There are the famous stories of where you had the British and you had the colonists, and they fought in the Napoleonic style, where they would shoot each other. And he literally, with his white horse, rode between them to inspire the colonists. And there are documented evidence that he never got struck, that in fact, bullets seemed to go through his hat and his coat. So he really believed that it was Providence. And I kind of think like what I'm being controlled by is Providence. So when things get very, very, very bad and very down, and you become disheartened and you think, what the hell was I put through this for? Why should I continue on this path? I always go back to George Washington and recognize that you will not know the value of your journey until you end the journey, which basically ends on your deathbed. At that point, it will be made clear to you why you went through this journey. At any point in the journey, you don't know where you are because you're still in the journey. So I have forever looked to George Washington, not as a hero, but as a guy that really has inspired me from an emotional perspective, a sense of providence, a sense that, you might be on this earth and you might be human, but you may be being used for by a higher power and for a purpose you just don't understand. And that's okay. And you got to kind of put to bed asking the questions about it and simply live the life. You will be given the chance to understand it when it's all said and done. And that's how I try to live my life every day now.
Amazing. And what you're saying is, if you're an entrepreneur and you're single, you should find a sugar mama.
That's a very smart idea. George Washington would definitely agree with that.
Listen, I'm not a hater. So listen, if you find love and you happen to be taken care of materially, that's a nice little.
What's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that.
I don't hate.
There you go.
Go do it.
Good point.
Entrepreneurialism happens in many forms.
That's right.
Sugar dating, as I call it, works.
Absolutely. Hey, man, it might be that money that you get through that situation might help you help many, many people. So the person providing it could actually see themselves as more than just giving it to you, but giving it to others.
I think there's possibly a service coming out for this. I feel another PBS special coming out. So we're going to play a game, okay?
Yeah.
Since you're in Florida, we play a game with each guest, okay? We try to, sometimes we have some serious subjects, and sometimes we try to lighten things up a little bit,
sure,
as we just did. So we're going to play a game. It's called Fake or Florida. Let me give you the premise. You're going to get a kick out of this. I'll read two of the headlines, and we have to decide which one is real and which one has been made up by my team.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm going to read you a few things. Remember, real or made up. And because you're in Florida, I promise you this is not going to be easy. All right, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, first one. A Florida man is missing after trying to jet ski to the Bahamas.
Got it.
That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is Florida restaurant owner arrested for selling manatee steaks to patrons. Which one's fake and which one's Florida?
I'm gonna, I mean, as sick as that is, I'm going to say the manatee one is Florida.
Oh man, this is a good one. See, I don't know. My staff knows. We're going to find out in a
Okay.
I mean, I could see some knucklehead trying to jet ski to Bahamas too, though.
I mean, that's true. But here they barbecue everything. Alligator is huge. I mean, they barbecue it. So manatee, I don't know if a manatee is off limits or not. I'm not sure.
You're going to manatee sushi, and I'm going to knucklehead to Bahamas. All right. Who's got the answers?
Knucklehead to Bahamas is Florida.
Knucklehead to Bahamas is
wow. There you go.
See, I have a condo
insane
in Miami, so I'm starting to know the Floridians. All right, let's go to number two.
Okay.
Florida man in prison after impersonating rapper Flo Rida at child's birthday party. So he actually tried to pass himself off as the rapper. Or Florida man accused of pouring bleach into coworker's drink for being difficult to work with.
Wow. I hope it's the Flo Rida one.
I'm unfortunately going to go with the second one.
Wow, really?
I could see having work trauma and not being able to get over it because you didn't get your way. Mommy didn't give you the toys you wanted early
Wow.
on. So you put bleach into
That's
the coworker's drink.
that's insane. I mean, that sounds like a criminal act.
Yeah. It's Florida, baby.
Yeah.
All right. So which one is it?
The bleach is Florida.
The bleach is
Wow.
Florida.
And I'm not drinking that water you gave me earlier.
Wow.
So I like you. Don't worry. Don't worry.
That's crazy.
I'm
Oh
much
my
more
God.
predictable than that. But how crazy is that, right?
That's horrible.
Yeah. All right. You ready for number 3?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. By the way, just to let the record show, Dr. Slava's number 2-0.
Yeah.
Florida man accused of trying to steal Florida school bus in broad daylight. Number 2 is Florida woman arrested after creating a fake marriage license that claims she married Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
I'll have to go with that one. That's sick enough that someone would do that.
I believe that they were trying to take a school bus in daylight. I mean,
I do agree that too.
the second one is very compelling. Also, I got to know the answer to this one. Which one is it?
The school bus is Florida.
The school bus.
There you go. Okay.
So there we go. Florida is a great place. And, we have some characters.
Absolutely.
And we got to keep trucking and doing good, but keep your eyes wide open and
absolutely
watch what you're drinking. So we want to know about you. Please plug yourself. Give us all your information. Where can we find you? Give us some last nuggets of wisdom. Bring it all together.
Sure. So if someone wants to reach me, you can do it by email at drmitch@mitchellyass.com. Or you could go to my website, which is Live Without Pains. It's plural, livewithoutpains.com. There's a contact us button. If you decide you would want a Yass Method, you could actually schedule your own appointment. There's a scheduler on there. I'd like people to know that if you want to get more information, certainly my YouTube channel, in my opinion, is the best way to get that information. That's simply Dr. Mitchell Yass. Or you could go on Facebook at the Yass Method. Those are all ways of getting just free content. Obviously there's the books, the PBS special, but I think that's the easiest way and obviously the most inexpensive way. In terms of what I want people to understand is that if a tissue is creating a symptom and that tissue is treated appropriately, your symptoms should resolve fairly quickly. So if you've been treated for months or years, at some point, you are going to have to take the responsibility on your own. I know you're not medical. I don't care that you're not medical. You're a human being and you're responsible for your own well-being. And you're going to have to make the decision, this isn't right. I need to go somewhere else. If in fact you're being told something structural, just as I told you, if someone's telling you the cause of your pain structural, that is to say that structure exists 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you better be having pain at a constant level 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you note your pain is associated with activity and that it diminishes by resting, then you have to begin to say to yourself again, maybe I'm misdiagnosed, maybe it's muscular. So these are the types of things I want people to start taking responsibility and having some baseline understanding about how you know what's causing your pain. The other big thing I want people to understand is this may have been going on with you for years now, and you've tried everything you thought was right. You've gone to all the doctors, all the treatments, all the medications, and now you're really scared. You're frustrated, anxious, you're hopeless, and you probably may be going on to thinking about killing yourself. And my answer to you is never, ever, ever take that road. I can promise you, and I truly in my heart believe this, there is an answer to every question. I can promise you there is an answer to your pain. You just have to keep searching. Please, for God's sakes, never go down that path.
Beautiful, Doc. Beautiful. It's been a pleasure having you. I hope people realize that these methodologies, this thinking, unfortunately, is rare. in the medical community. So contact Dr. Yass and get over there and get yourself healthy. And if you need anything, I'm here available for all you listeners. Dr. Yass is available for you. Please get out there and contact and get some help. You do not have to live with pain. So basically, be sure to like, subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening, make sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you for listening to the Time Is Now podcast with me, Dr. Slava Shut. And tune in every Friday at 2 p.m. and send in your questions to Dr. Slava Shut on Twitter. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.